Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Happy Sunday, y'all. What's happening? Glad everybody could join in today. It's going to be just kind of a easygoing day today. Um, not a whole heck of a lot of an issue. Uh-oh. Am I okay audio-wise? Am I having audio problems? Is there any issue with my audio? Let's see. I'll give you guys a chance to reply. I think if I was having an audio issue, somebody would have said something by now. It is okay. All right. Terrific. Thank you. Audio is fine. Sounds good. Okay. uh, Bill Stoffer, thank you for noticing. I got a new camera. That old one was like 2 steps above a potato, but only you know, just it was barely okay. So new camera, much higher resolution. It's still 720p because of the plan that I'm on with StreamYard. That is my streaming platform. Um, I there's nothing I do on these live streams that is worth 1080 or 4K. And let me just spoiler alert, there will not be 4K video on this channel. File sizes are just nuts. So before I do anything else, I want to acknowledge and give a major shout out to the sponsor of MarkLindsayCNC.com. That is Harneal Media. Steve is there in the chat. He comes in, he doesn't say a whole heck of a lot. He kind of helps keep an eye on things in the background there. The man is phenomenal. And if you are thinking about a website, let me tell you, there is no better way to establish or increase your web presence than by having your own dedicated website. And if you are a maker, if you are even contemplating a garage based business just as a side gig or something like that, you need to have a chat with Steve. He himself is a small business, and it's 100% personalized service. You're not talking to some nameless, faceless entity in a call center somewhere. Every email, every chat, every conversation, every correspondence you have, you're having it with Steve. He's I won't say a one-man show because there are two people involved with Harneo Media, but you're going to get 100% personalized service. I highly recommend his services. He is dynamite. He's on top of it. So that's Harneo Media. There's a link to his website in the description box of all of my videos, all of them. Uh, Check him out. I can't endorse him enough. And just as an aside, I'm proud to call him a friend. So let's see here. We've got a bunch of questions so far. Man. Today was finally the video on finish surfacing this Douglas fir slab. And if for those of you who've been paying attention, you were asking a couple of weeks ago about those witness marks that were running back and forth on the surface. This is about maybe a minute and a half with 150 grit on my random orbit sander, and it's those witness marks are gone. Again, there is no shingling, there is no scalloping. It is just 100% smooth and beautiful, and it's ready to move on. Now I'm got to get somebody to make a couple of decisions, then I can carry on with the project. Let me set this over here so it doesn't fall over. I mentioned in the video, in the portion where I was creating the toolpath, I mentioned I wanted to take it slow and be a little bit, gentle with the toolpath, because there's some defects in there that I didn't want to launch out of the dust shoe or destroy my bit with. And of course, I went ahead and put it down. Now I need to pick it back up. Ugh. Sure enough, that big knot came right out. And anyway, and chunked around a couple of times underneath the dust shoe, and then made loud noises going through the dust collector hose. But the point remains, I was trying not to knock all those knots loose and have shards flying everywhere. Luckily for me, no damage. It didn't damage the bit at all. That RC2255 bit, I know I've used it a lot here lately, and I've mentioned it a lot here, but didn't even feel that thing. I mean, there's no damage to the carbide inserts, no damage to the cutters, and that was a pretty sizable chunk of knot in there. But if I'd have been more aggressive with it, it could have been a heck of a lot worse. So, uh, Peter Van Vliet, are the witness marks normal due to the material, or is it a tramming opportunity? The best way to think of it, Peter, is if you think of mowing a lawn. If you mow one direction, turn around and come back the next direction, you've got a slightly different pattern in the lawn, depending upon where you're looking at it from. Well, it's the same with this. You're cutting one direction, then moving over, and then coming back and cutting the other direction. It's all the same height. It's just an appearance thing. And a little bit of 150 grit sandpaper just eliminated that difference in appearance. Uh, if you've ever been to a baseball stadium or been to a football game, you'll notice the same thing. You can tell the pattern that they mowed that grass in. Well, this is the exact same thing. It's all nice and smooth. You can't feel anything, but there's an appearance thing. And, uh, that's one of the reasons why I say, um, yeah, that might be it. Maybe I do need to get under there and tram the blade, you know? Oh, Wade, do not start that, okay? Because I can see it now. About half of the lawnmower and small engine channels will be out there with dial indicators, making sure that thing is perfectly level underneath. It's like, dude, it's a lawnmower. Push it. So, I see a couple of suggestions here that are actually very good suggestions. Ozguzi, did I just butcher your name? Super glue the knots before machining. Excellent point. Rick French, could you have filled around the knot spaces with epoxy before surfacing? Yes, I very well could have. Um, I'm gonna be honest with you. I kind of I, I won't say I speeded through this, but I speeded through this. It was a case of I've got to get this done, get it out of here, get it off the machine and in the house before it starts warping and cupping again. That's the fatal flaw with wood. It's a natural product, and it's gonna move. I mean, wood moves long after the tree is long dead. I don't know how old this slab is. Um, I've had it for 5 or 6 years, so Lord knows how old it is, but it's going to continue to move based on its environment. And out here right now, I mean, looking at the weather right here, right now, we're at 86% humidity. Um, 36 Fahrenheit's the temperature, 32 Fahrenheit is the dew point. So we've got a lot of moisture in the air. And something like this will just wick it right up and swell and start warping and twisting, especially as it dries out later on. So Let's see here. Russell Faraday says, before machining, I drop some CA glue and sawdust around knots that might get loose. Seems to work very well. Uh, yeah, and that is a legitimate option, and I should have done that. Uh, you know, live and learn. As I say, I am not an expert. My goal, my mission here is to try to help you avoid the mistakes that I made. So, all good suggestions. Um, and I will do that in the future. Uh, I've surfaced materials before, but I don't do a lot of live edge work. I don't do a lot of slabs. I tend to, well, I've already put it away. I tend to, well, let me go ahead and get it. I tend to take things that just need flattening or planing to thickness, like this piece of used to be solid walnut flooring. It had a finish on one side that was totally white after water damage, and the other side had the grooves in it, the ventilation grooves that solid wood flooring has. That's the kind of surfacing I do. We don't tend to get a lot of knots in that kind of material. I mean, there are some, but what I would do before in running it through just a standard planer is I would go ahead and knock out every knot that was loose just so it didn't break loose in the planer, knowing I was going to have to cut that area out anyway in order to use whatever piece of material I had. But I would just go ahead and break them out or drill them out if they wouldn't break cleanly. So that way I didn't have pieces flying all over the place. But overall, the shallower uh, pass depth really did help out a lot. It for those into the numbers, it made a total of 4 passes to get it down to final thickness, and each pass took approximately a minute and a half. When I edited the video, that entire sequence was about 4.5 minutes, 4 3/4 minutes long that I time lapsed down. Each pass didn't take very long at all because this machine and that bit, they're both a beast in their own right. So I ended up running that. I bumped up the feed rate on the fly, and I ended up running that at 240 inches a minute. And that bit and that machine didn't even feel it. I could have gone faster than that, but I thought, why push it? So, all in all, I'm very happy with it, very satisfied with it. And as I say, now I just got to get one person to make a couple of decisions, and then I can carry on with the project, and that'll be behind me. But that'll be off camera. That won't be a video. So, okay, here we have a few questions here. Robert Dymock, I knew this was going to come up, and I didn't explain it very well in the video. And I know because I'm going to do a separate video on this topic and focus on it. As I said last week, I'm going to, in some videos, get back to my roots and try to explain things for people who have never done this type of thing before, absolute beginners. Um, that doesn't mean that I'm going to quote unquote dumb down the channel. That just means that some videos are going to be for 100% beginners and other videos are going to be more advanced. Uh, Robert says, would you please explain the benefits of Z0 from the work surface versus from the spoil board surface? Yes, there are a couple. In this video, I created 2 tool paths, one from the material surface and the other from the spoil board surface. When cutting down to a specific thickness, I wanted that bit to end up 1.125 in this case above that spoil board. So measuring from the spoil board was the proper way to go. Then I could take that thickness and enter it into VCarve or Aspire or Cut 2D like I showed in the video and work down to it. One of the benefits is if you're doing a profile pass, for instance, and you set your Z0 to the spoil board, if you set your cut depth for your profile toolpath, okay, Tim Belt, you might go ahead and refresh this page, or check the little down at the bottom of the video panel, click that gear and set it to, it may say auto 720p, but go ahead and click on 720p. That'll get the YouTube to adjust the resolution. I shouldn't be out of focus. Then again, with this beard, maybe. But if you set your Z0 to the machine bed and you set your material thickness to, for example, 3/4 of an inch or 19 millimeters, and it doesn't matter the actual surface height, when you go to do that profile cut, it's going to cut down to that 0 point and stop. So it's not going to dig into your spoil board, and you're going to get an accurate cut all the way through the material, no matter what the actual thickness of the material is. So if you set your Z0 on your machine bed and you have told the software that your material is 3/4 of an inch, and it's actually, instead of 0.75, it's 0.753. It doesn't matter how much above that 3/4 of an inch the material actually is. It's going to cut all the way down to that 0 level that you set without diving into your spoil board. Okay. Setting to the material surface, the benefits there are if you are V-carving into the material surface, it sets that 0 point at the material surface, and it knows it needs to carve down to a certain depth. It will get to that certain depth if you set it to the material surface. If you set it to the machine bed, it may carve deeper than you want, and it may not carve as deep as you want, depending upon the actual thickness of that material. So basically, put on a pocket that doesn't go all the way through, or V carving, you would want to set your Z0 to your material surface. And the same thing for 3D carving. You'd want to set your Z0 to your material surface. If you're drilling through or profiling through, you would want to set the Z0 to the machine bed, unless you're like me and you don't mind tearing up your spoil board, you know. So those are some of the benefits, the pros and cons. There isn't really a 100% right way, wrong way on a lot of these. I know some folks who use machine bed for just about everything, and they're happy with it. And if it works for you, great. I'm not going to try to convince anybody that you're wrong. I've never done that. If you are like I used to be and everything was set to the material surface, then fine. If it's working for you and you get the result that you want predictably every time, then you're doing it right. So let's see. IL Peleg makes an excellent point here. Also, if you V-carve and set Z0 to the material surface, you can then do the same carve on different stock pieces with different thicknesses. Absolutely. Because if you have your Z0 set to the surface and you're doing a V carving, and the maximum depth that bit is going to go is, let's say, 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch. V-carve doesn't care if that material is 19 millimeters or 3/4 of an inch thick, or if it's 12 millimeters and a half inch thick. It doesn't care. It's going to start at the surface and cut down that depth and just go. So, the whatever works for you and whatever's easiest for you. Where people get in trouble is when they start mixing Z0 locations. It's kind of like my opinion on metric versus imperial. If you're used to using one over the other, and then you try to convert, that's when the issues start happening. If you focus on one and stay there, you're good. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just when you try to mix and match, it can be done and it can be done quite easily. You just have to remember to do that. So, let's see here. Russell Faraday says, I do more and more multi-sided 3D stuff. Much easier for me to Z to bed because every material face changes with the flips. Yes, absolutely. If you remove a bunch of material from one side or the other, that's also another good argument for doing setting Z0 to the machine bed for 3D carves. And that is, if you set your Z0 to the machine bed, it doesn't matter what you carve away on that 3D model. When you go to do a tool change from roughing to finishing, your Z0 position is constant. I've seen a lot of people ask, I've had a lot of people ask me about that, and I'm going to do a separate video on this as well. Is that, okay, great, I did my roughing toolpath, but now my Z0 position has been carved away. What do I do? Well, if you've set your Z0 to the machine bed, that's not an issue. But I'm also going to throw in a few more options, and this will be another beginner video. It won't be the next video, but also, Russell, I don't know if you have done keyed or indexed multi-sided 3D carves, but I'm going to be doing some of that as well. Let's see. So Robert, I hope that helps. Again, I do plan on a more detailed video in the future. This was kind of a taste of things to come, considered an appetizer. But there are uh, good points for both. And this is another one of those cases where there really is no best. You know, it's personal preference, basically. Excuse me. Okay, Anonymous over in Romania says, can you explain how to split a big project into multiple parts? This is multifaceted because it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about a 2D carve, like a V carve that's bigger than your machine is, um, you can tile the tool paths. And I will have a toolpath tiling project coming up. I hope to have that video done in February, but it might be March. It's just going to depend on when I can get that project done. If you're talking about something that is a large 3D project that is bigger than your material thickness, and how to split that up, I will be doing a video on that later on this year as well. That's called slicing. If you're talking about a 3D project that's longer than your machine bed, that's going to be the same thing with tiling tool paths. So it really depends on what you're talking about. And the subject is much deeper than I can explain in this live stream. But okay, for example, I have a 2-meter project. I want to split it in 50 by 50. You'll then in that case, you will want to tile the tool paths. And again, I'll be doing a tiling video later on. I'm I'm practicing right now and getting the steps down before I start doing the actual project. And there's another tip I'll give you. Find as much free material as you can to practice on. For instance, in my area, old fence boards are perfect for this because it's a long piece of wood that was probably headed for the landfill anyway. Uh, and I can practice tiling and do long cuts on this all day, and I have no issue carving up and making mistakes on material that was headed for the landfill. You know, so it's just uh, I'm working on it now. It may be late February, it may be early March before I can get that project up. We'll see. It's just going to depend on a number of things. So, Ronald Cool, thank you. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat. I really appreciate it. Ronald has been a follower of mine for a long time. And, thank you, Ronald. I really, really appreciate it. Let's see here. Rick French says if you set to material surface so that you can make repeat carves on different thicknesses of material, you need to remember to reset the thickness for the final profile cut. Don't ask how I know. Yeah, that's why I've got a 3/16 inch deep trough around on my spoil board because, another tip, Rick, remember that when you surface material, that thickness changes. That's how I ended up with that 3/16 deep trough in my spoil board. So when you go through and you do your you do your design and you calculate your tool paths, then you surface the material, that thickness has changed. Yeah. So Russell Faraday says I messed up a large project, split it into multiple parts with an axe to get it into the wood burner. Hey, you know, there is, I don't know. It was, I want to say, was it you, Rick, who biscuit jointed the oak together and then went to go carve a 3D project into it and exposed those biscuits in the biscuit joint? I believe it was Rick. Now you know why I call my planer the eraser. Because I believe if at first you don't succeed, eliminate any evidence of the attempt, but also plane that sucker down and you can use that material for something else. You can use it for something else. I mean, okay, I've made a few mistakes, but surface that sucker flat and start over. Flip it up on edge and laminate it. So, and I didn't mean to embarrass you, Rick, but I, been there, done that, got the T-shirt. So, let's see here. Scott Malak says, I'm cutting two 4-inch pockets, 0.0625 apart. I offset inside to clear with a 1/2 inch ball nose, then inside profile with a 3/4 inch bowl bit, then pocket with a 3/4 inch bowl bit, started okay, and it cuts outside the line. All right. So it's cutting outside the line. Try and you're doing pockets. Yes, you are doing pockets. Add a let me take down your question here and let me go ahead and screen share. Let's see, is this not that button, Mark? That was interesting. I got to reprogram my Stream Deck. Okay, let's see here. Let's try this again. I see what's going on. What happened was, you can't see this because there's no way I can share it with you. StreamYard has, this is how a little bitty thing can mess you up big time. When I click on share screen, it brings up a little panel, then I select what I'm going to share. Well, I had programmed a button on my Stream Deck to where it did that all automatically. Well, that little panel that pops up, I have a choice. I can share my entire screen, I can share one window, or I can share a tab in Chrome. They changed the order that those display on the little panel that pops up. So now all of the key moves that that button did have changed. So what that did was basically it shut down my web browser. So I had to open it up and come back in and hope like I could get back in here. So little little inside baseball. All right, let me go ahead and share this. We've got, let's say, a pocket here that we're going to pocket out. We've got this rectangle here. And you're using a 3/4 inch bowl bit. Okay. When you go to make that pocket, you can, let's see, use a pocket allowance right here. Okay. Now I'm going to do a 3/8 end mill. Let's see. I also want to do a 3/4 inch bowl bit. And let's move that up to the top. So I'm going to use the 3/8 end mill to clear that out. And I'm not going to use any kind of a pocket allowance. Let's go ahead and calculate it. And let's change the color of my material so you can see it a little bit better. And we'll do the clearance pass first. And we'll preview that. Whoops. Yeah, I forgot to do my depth. Let's cut depth. Let's make that 0.5. Calculate. There we go. Now let's preview that one. There we go. Okay, so we've got a good pocket there. Let me jump back over into my 2D view, and I'm going to put a check mark in my toolpath. Then I'm going to come up here and toggle the toolpath drawing visibility. What it is right now is it's showing that toolpath in a wireframe. I want to click on that. Oops, wrong one. No, it was the visibility. I'm sorry. It's this one over here, the toolpath drawing style, wireframe or solid. And that's showing a solid toolpath. That's showing the area that that bit is going to hollow out. And you can see out here, it's not quite up to that vector. Okay. So now let me just put a check mark right there in pocket, and we see it's going to come up close, right close onto that vector. Now, that's something to check out. First of all, is go ahead and toggle that over so it's showing the solid view. If this is too small or if this is too large, you can go uncheck these. Let's go back into our toolpath and let's do a pocket allowance. Now, this is going to sound counterproductive, or counterintuitive rather. But if you use a positive number, it's going to cut that pocket slightly smaller. If you use a negative number, it's going to cut that pocket slightly larger. So I've got a positive. Let's go for 0.01, 10 thousandths. And we'll recalculate. Go back over to the 2D view. And if you look at that, we'll uncheck the clearance. This is just the bowl bit. And now if you look at it, it's not quite going out to that vector. It's 10 thousandths under. It's staying away from that vector. Okay. Now let me go back and we'll change that to 5 thousandths, 05, calculate, go back over to the 2D view, and it's a lot closer now. So the end all of this is if it's cutting outside of the line, bring that back in by adding a positive pocket allowance, however much it needs to be brought back inside that line. Okay. Something to remember when we're talking about these measurements. For instance, mine is a 3/4 inch bowl bit. That's a nominal diameter. It may be just a little bit larger than 0.75. It may be 0.755 or 0.753. It may be 0.748. That's a nominal dimension. That doesn't mean that's exactly how big that bit is. And every bit is like that. Your 1/4 inch end mill may or may not actually be 0.25 inches in diameter. Okay. If I do a normal pocket, it's fine, just when I use a start depth. Oh, okay. If you're doing a start depth shouldn't matter. A start depth should not matter. That doesn't make sense. The start depth should not matter. Let me go back. I am still screen sharing here. Let me put in a start depth point. I'm gonna make it a small one. 0.625, same as yours. Calculate it. Reset. I don't even need to see the preview actually. And oh, wait a minute. Let me go back and remove that pocket allowance and calculate that. Now let's take a look. Well, it shouldn't make a difference. That is odd. Okay, Tom Bunton says using anything other than 0 as a start depth with a bowl bit will overcut the circle. Okay. Unless using it as a standard end mill, form tool and radius end mill will overcut. Wow. Wow. You used a bowl bit with an end mill for clearance bit. Is that what was done with my earlier question? I don't think I've gotten to your question, Lewis, unless you were talking about something that you asked before in the members only. There it is. Yeah, I just haven't gotten to your question yet. I did not know. I have to claim ignorance on this, Tom. I did not know that using anything other than 0 as a start depth with a bowl bit would overcut a circle or the vector. I did not know that. I'm going to have to get in and do some experimentation with it. I just recently got these bowl bits. Thank you, Sargon. And I have not had the opportunity to use them yet. Okay, I guess that answers both of our questions because that shouldn't be happening. I think it's a bug. The calculation shows it. Yeah. Have you reached out to Vectric about this? and let them know, because this is another one of those cases of they can't fix it if they don't know there's an issue. So by all means, reach out to them, let them know what's going on, what you're experiencing, and if you can let them know how much it overcuts, that would be a help. But do report that bug. That they need to know about that so they can try to fix it. Um, no, you let Kyle work on it. Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, reach out to him because that shouldn't be. That's something. Um, Please experiment, but I'm starting an over-under on spoil board damage. Well, you're talking about a bowl bit. You shouldn't be cutting through the material with a bowl bit. I mean, you could, but there's a lot of things you could do. So, okay, let's see here. And get to Lewis's question. I was brought a sample of a sign. It was raised text with tapered side of the letters. Was this done with V-carve and straight edge end mill? Um, that's one way of doing it. Lewis, I have another question for you. Do you have V-carve or Aspire? Um, because an Aspire, I don't know. Could somebody with V-carve let me know if in your, let's see, is it in the, it is in the modeling tab. No. Um, yeah, it would be in your modeling tab. Could you let me know if you have add draft to your in your modeling tab? Lewis, if you have Aspire, if you go, let me go back to sharing here. I knew I shouldn't have stopped. Boom, share. If you go into your modeling tab and look down here on the bottom row, this icon right here is add draft to a component. Now, it changes this to a 3D component, this raised text, but you can add draft, which is a slope on the sides. This is used a lot in, well, it's used all the time in mold making. To add a little bit of draft so you can get that positive mold or positive mold buck out of that negative mold. It's also used as a stylistic type of a thing. The advantage of using added draft is you can use it. You can use any angle you want. You can even use a percentage or a run, meaning over this depth of an inch, you can make it draft outwards by a 16th of an inch, or you can just use a straight angle like a 2-degree draft, whichever you prefer to use. Um, but it converts to a 3D toolpath. There's another way of doing it that is quicker because 3D toolpaths are always going to be slower. And that is you can use a V-carve toolpath instead of a pocket to go around to clear out that entire area. Like for instance, let's select this and we'll center it first of all, and I'll open it up a little bit more here. There we go. And now let's put some text in here. Go to your drawing toolpath, dummy. There you go. Text. I got to wait for all my fonts to open. Okay, yes, I see folks are saying it's not in VCarve Pro. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much. I haven't used VCarve in so long. I don't remember what is available and what isn't. And let's see, I put my name out here in the middle. That's good enough. I'm not going to get fancy with this. And I do this. and I do a V-carve toolpath instead of a pocket. Now notice I selected the text and this outside border. And I'm going to use the 15-degree V-bit, cutting to a flat depth of 0.15. That's good enough. Use a clearance tool, and I'll use a 1/2-inch end mill. And it doesn't matter, I'll use an offset and calculate it. What it's going to do, let's preview all, no, let's preview the visible toolpaths. I don't want to cut out that thing. It's going to come along and it's going to slope the sidewalls of this raised text. It's also going to slope the sidewalls of this pocket out here. Now, let me reset that. Go back in here and let's change this 15-degree V-bit to a 30-degree V-bit. Come out to a straight Z, recalculate, and we'll have a more dramatic preview visible. We'll have a more dramatic slope on these letters here. So yes, you can make it a 3D component if you want, or you can do this with a standard V-bit. My advice would be, however, let me reset that and we'll move that up. My advice would be to carve the V-carve toolpath first, because things like these thin areas here have more support when you're cutting into a flat surface than if you have already carved out the clearance. Now, with no support here, you run a greater chance of chipping out the serif on this R or the serif on this M when it comes time to run that V-bit toolpath. So I always run the V-bit toolpath first, because now I'm less likely to break off that serif on the R or on the M or even down here on the A. Okay? So, but just remember that you'll need to select the text as well as that border. Now, for instance, excuse me, if you don't want that perimeter out here, you don't want this to have a slope or a slant to it. What you could do, close, go back over to drawing tab, and I'll just select that. And I'm going to offset inwards, let's say by 1/4 of an inch, 0.25, create sharp offset corners, and then offset. Now I can come over and I will hold down Shift, deselect this one, select that one, calculate, reset the preview. Now I'll preview those visible toolpaths. Then I'll come back over, select these two, and do a standard pocket. Pocket. And let's remove this one. Remove this one. We'll select an 1/8 inch end mill. Select. And go back over to my 3D view. Look at it. It's 0.15 is the depth. So my cut depth will be 1.5. Calculate it. then preview. How did I do that? Oh, I left a ridge there. Okay, let's go back in here. And we're going to set a, do I want negative or do I want positive? I want positive pocket allowance of, let's go with 0.05. Calculate, preview. No, it didn't do it. I left a ridge there. Well, I'll have to just draw another vector and clear out that ridge. See what I'm talking about? I left that little ridge right there. Well, anyway, you can figure it out. It's, let's see, I want to, yeah, I'll just go ahead and draw another rectangle. I'll offset in by another 1/8 of an inch offset. There we go. Close that. And for this pocket, I'll use Control Shift. There. Calculate. Reset preview. Let's do all 3 of those visible toolpaths at once. Boom. There. That's what I was going after. I needed an overlap. I know that was more than you wanted to know, but there you go. That way you've got that angled edge on your letters, but you don't have the angled edge out here on your pocket. So now Blaine is asking, what about the Prism toolpath and Aspire? I'm going to claim ignorance there too, because I haven't really played with the Prism carving toolpath. I need to get in there and play with it. I've never even used it. There are a few things here that I've never used, I've never touched. Photo VCarve is one of them. Prism toolpath is one of them. Quick engraving toolpath is one of them. I've just not done anything. Now that may do what you want it to do. And retired firefighter, same with you. But I believe the Prism toolpath, I believe that peak meets in the middle. I believe it's to give a little bit of lift to the center along the letters here and leave a peak. So it looks like the text is chiseled. So, but again, that's what I believe. I don't know that for a fact. I need to get in and play with it because, like I said, I haven't even touched it. Okay, we got one last question, and that is from Jim Brown. What happens when moisture is too high or too low? Basically, it's less about the moisture than it is the changes in moisture. If the moisture is too high, it's going to eventually dry because moisture is just going to evaporate. That leads to warping and cracking. And in the case of this piece of slab here, you can see all the cracks on the end. That is due to it being allowed to air dry without some form of sealer on this end grain. As it dries, it contracts, but then as it swells again, when more moisture in the air, when it picks up more moisture out of the air around it, it's going to swell again. And that expansion and contracting cracks. And that's what causes a lot of that. It will also cause warping and cupping because just simple fact of life, wood moves long after the tree is dead. And that's one of the reasons why, well, that's the major reasons why you don't mix grain directions. If you, like a breadboard edge on a table, if you glue a breadboard edge and firmly attach it to that table, when that table tries to expand and contract, and you have grain running front to rear, and you have that breadboard edge with the grain running side to side, when that table tries to expand and contract, it's not going to be able to. The wood is still going to expand and contract, but it's got nowhere to go. So what's going to happen is it's going to buckle because it's got to go somewhere. Um, and that's if you put it together dry and it expands a little bit. On the other hand, if you put it together when it's still a little bit damp and it starts to contract, that's when you get into splitting. It's not going to split the glue joint. The glue is stronger than the wood. It's going to split out here somewhere, and that glue joint's still going to be good. That's why if you watch people that make end grain cutting boards, if they're doing a walnut cutting board with a maple trim, let's say, that's why they glue up end grain pieces of maple and use that around the trim. That's why they don't just stick a piece up there with side grain and frame it, because when you mix grain directions, you're asking for trouble. It has to be able to move. So if the grain orientation is all in the same direction, if there's any expanding or contracting, it's all going to expand and contract at more or less the same rate. The moisture content, we should probably go for as dry as we can get. Um, and it also depends on what you're doing. If you're a luthier working on instruments, I mean, you may be looking at something at 6%, 6 to 8%. Normal woodworking, like, signs or furniture or something like that, 8 to 10%, 12, maybe 14. But it also depends on your environment. Like when we lived in the Nevada desert, we had humidity, relative humidity. We're talking about 10, 11, 12% was common. Then you bring things into a more humid environment like we have here, and things swell up. So um, that's one of the reasons why people have so many problems with construction grade materials they buy at the big box store. Um, because a standard 2x4 stud is green, it's been air dried, maybe. And you can feel the moisture when you pick up that 2x4 and you start cutting on it. Even if you go get a kiln dried 2x4, they are only kiln dried down to about 19%. It has to be less than 20% moisture content for them to say it's kiln dried. So just for cost effectiveness, they bring it down to about 19%. That's still too wet for woodworking. That's why you have the construction grade pine, hemlock, and fir out in the building materials section, but you go inside a little deeper into the store and you've got pine, spruce, fir there that has been dried way down to 10 or 12%. Maybe maybe less, maybe more. But that's also why experts will tell you it doesn't matter what you're working with, whether it's hardwood, softwood, construction grade, or furniture grade. Uh, bring it into the area where it's going to be used and let it acclimate for about a week if you can. Flooring installers, you know this. You bring your flooring into the place it's going to be installed and you let it acclimate for about a week. That'll let it expand and contract and do what it's going to do before you start putting down a a $10,000 hardwood floor, and then all of a sudden gaps start opening or floorboards start cracking or something like that. It's got to acclimate. Pin or pinless moisture meters, is there a difference when checking the levels? Yes. And it's very rare that you'll find two moisture meters, pinless moisture meters that'll read the same thing. And it's very rare that you'll find two pin type moisture meters that'll read the same thing. What you're looking for is relative. What you're looking for is relative moisture content, and that's going to vary day by day. It really is. So yeah, you can really get in the weeds in this because I know some luthiers that they shoot for a moisture content of 4%, which is kind of ridiculous to me. In that, what you're just the moisturing glue is going to cause things to swell. So I don't know. I think 4% is a little bit overboard. Then again, I know luthiers who sand their fretboards down to 4,000 grit, and I don't do that. So, it's up to you. Um, but yeah, if you build something out of material that's too wet, you open yourself up to cupping, warping, twisting, bowing as it dries. If you make something out of, I don't think there really is such a thing as too dry. If you can get it down to 10% or less moisture content, pretty much you're good. Because the minute it leaves your shop and goes to whoever the recipient is, you don't know what their environmental conditions are like. Do they have uh, oh my gosh, humidifiers or dehumidifiers in their house? Do they do a lot of cooking where they've got things boiling all the time or baking all the time? Do they, you can't account for every environment. So if you can get material 10, 12%, you're usually pretty good. So Peter Van Vliet, seems like the thicker the material, the harder it is to know what the moisture content is at a particular portion of the wood. True, unless the surface level with a pin meter is close enough. So, yeah, I mean, there's always going to be movement. Rule number one of woodworking is wood is always going to move. Rule number two is nobody can change rule number one. It's just a fact. That's why today they don't make big cabinets out of solid wood. They're made out of plywood or some other material. That's because you have that stability. You don't have a cabinet that wants to start leaning or wants to twist slightly, or the doors don't want to fit right, or the drawers don't want to shut all the way in the wintertime when it dries out, or in the summertime when the humidity's up. We don't have those issues with plywoods or man-made materials. So, okay, that I just got way deeper in the weeds than I meant to. Thank you very much, everybody. A lot of good questions. I will, by all means, get into that Prism Toolpath and go from there. I wanted to experiment it for quite a while. So I'm going to get in and play around with it and see what's going on. The next week it will be an open Q&A. I did see your comment, Rick. Getting a fairly consistent circle glare off of one of your lights on my glasses. Yes, that's my ring light. Is it adjustable? It is. I'm still trying to find that balance. Let me play with it right now. Still, I look up at the camera. Well, that's better. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm still going to have that ring, but it's not as bad now. Okay. Thank you, by the way. I need that kind of feedback to let me know. I can't make it go any higher right now while I'm sitting here. So next week will be open Q&A, and the video after that is going to be something called narrowcasting. I'm going to try to make it relevant to as many people as I can. For those of you who have eagle eyes, you'll notice that in the first video in this series, I was using a piece of paper under my big surfacing bit to set my Z0. Simply put, it's too big to fit in the touch plate of the Avid CNC. Well, over in the second video, the one that went live today, I was using my old touch plate that has open sides that I could set the Z0 on that big surfacing bit. I added a second touch plate to my controller and Mach 4. And so the next video in 2 weeks is going to be how I did that. I'm going to try to make it relevant to most CNC routers, but it's basically narrowcasting to Avid CNC owners. Like I said, I'm going to try to make it relevant to everybody, as many people as possible. But this way, now I have 2 touch plates, and oh, excuse me. Now I have 2 touch plates, and I have the option if I'm using a large bit or a small bit, and basically just showing how to set up a touch plate. So, let's see. Dwayne says the problem with the prism is that it tries to cut deep enough for the edges to join at a center based on the angle of the V-bit. Yeah, okay. I'll keep that in mind. I'll keep that in mind, but I haven't used it just yet. So, all right. But that video will come out in 2 weeks. And after that, I'm not really certain. I may have a tiling toolpath video. We'll see. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. It may be something else entirely. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. I want to say thank you to all of my channel members like Dwayne, like Lewis, like Brooks Martin, like Rick French, and all of the rest of my channel members out here. Blaine, thank you very much for joining me today, and thank you very much for becoming channel members. Tomorrow evening, channel members, the members only live stream. I got your email, Dwayne. I will answer that as soon as I'm done here and get that fixed. And I'm not sure what we're going to do tomorrow. I think we have some unfinished business, and Tom as well, channel member. If you would like some information on becoming a channel member, just click the join button down there next to the subscribe button. A panel will pop up and a video will play and tell you about channel membership here on my channel. I want to thank everybody for joining me and see you channel members tomorrow night. Until then, yeah, that's it. Y'all take care. Have a good time. It's Sunday. Take it easy today. You earned it. Take a break. Bye, y'all. Thank you and take care.